trinomials today, and we are going to look at two types of groups when we are doing this. Obviously, you know that a quadratic trinomial is one that has got the highest power is a square, all right? So it's to the second degree in one variable polynomials, and it's either the powers are in ascending or descending order. Like this one is descending, so that is x to the power 2, x to the power 1. All right. So the groups I'm talking about here is primarily what is in front of the constant term, the plus c that you have there, and it's trinomial. So I'm going to look at one that consists of 3 terms. Okay. And also we're going to look at when the sign in front of the constant term is negative. So I'm going to do it in different sections really. Okay, so let me get to it. Let's do a few where the sign is positive in front of the constant term, and also when the value of a, that is the leading coefficient here, if it's 1, all right, then I'm going to do if it's a number less than 1, or let's say a number bigger than 1. All right, so first we're going to look at an example like this. Ax squared plus bx plus c, the value of a is 1, the value of b is 5, and the value of c is positive 4, right? So the way you do this, there are obviously different methods out there, but primarily the thing that is most important, you have to find two numbers which multiply, give you 4, this constant, and then add up to positive 5. Now, something else also that you remember is this positive that you have here, whatever the two numbers are, must be identical to the sign of the value of b, which is positive. So my two brackets are going to have both pluses in there. Right, so the two numbers then that you are going to deal with, or that you can find, is 1 times 4, because 1 times 4 gives you 4, and 1 plus 4 gives you 5. Now there's no need to split the middle term when the a is equal to 1. So what you can simply do is you take these numbers and you insert them into brackets, where the one is x plus 1, the other one is x plus 4. Remember, I said both of them must be positive because of the middle value, all right, and because the constant here is a positive. Right, let's look at the second one here. So you have got x squared plus 8x plus 12. Again, we look for two numbers. When you multiply, give you 12, this positive 12, and when you add them, give you positive 8. Okay, so the numbers are 2 times 6 is relatively easy. You should do this one by trial and error. You can write down the factors of 12 and find out, okay, until you realize that 2 times 6 gives you 12, and 2 plus 6 also gives you 8. So you take these two values, you put them into brackets, x plus 2 and x plus 6. Now it doesn't matter which bracket you write first. Ultimately, there should only be one term here, because that is the reason why you are factorizing. Okay, so let me bring in one more where we have got positive values. So I went straight to the answer, but perhaps you can have a look at it if there is something that you are a little bit out with. So if you have 1 times 24, that gives you 24, but then there's no way that whenever you add the 1 with the 24, it does not give you the value of 10 that we are looking for. All right, so it actually gives you 25. So if you just quickly correct that, 1 plus 24, it gives you 25, and we are looking for 10. So we have to think of other factors. So you can start again by 2 times 12. Yeah, 2 times 12 still gives you 24, but then 2 plus 12 does not give you 10. In fact, it gives you 14. So I'm not looking for these ones then. What about 3? Well, if you look at 3, and 3 considering 24 if you want to know, well, that's going to be what, 3 times 8. Well, 3 times 8 gives you 24 as a product. But if you add 3 plus 8, it does also not give you the 10. In fact, it gives you 11. Also, that one we don't require. So what about 4 times 6? Yeah, 4 times 6 will work because 4 plus 6 obviously is going to give you 10. So this is the one that we are looking for. So one bracket you're going to have x plus 4, and the other bracket you're going to have x plus 6. All right, excuse the handwriting. So that is what I have done there. Okay, right, so it's a trial and error issue which you can work out, but you should be able to arrive relatively very easy at finding the product and also the sum. Okay, because this is not that complicated of a problem. Just remember, you have to do some side work somewhere in order for you to find these things. Now, it's also important that you remember not all quadratic equations or all quadratic expressions rather will factorize, but we're working with ones that do factorize. Okay, so we do work on a later stage. We're going to deal with things like when we deal with quadratic equations, we're going to deal with either by completing the square method or using the quadratic equation formula. Okay, but it's still important that you should be able to master this. All right, so here now I am doing one where the middle term is minus. Okay, remember it's still positive for the constant because now it's minus, so I'm going to look for the middle value must have two minuses, obviously, because identical to the middle value. All right, so the numbers are 2 times 4, and negative 2 times negative 4 gives you 8. So if you quickly have to check, so you have negative 2 times negative 4, that gives you positive 8. So that checks the box for this positive 8 here. And then what about negative 2 plus negative 6, negative 4 rather. Negative 2 plus negative 4 gives you nothing but negative 6. And that negative 6 also then checks our middle value. So when it's positive, our brackets will have identical signs to our value of b. Our value of b, remember, you have got x squared plus bx. That's what I'm referring to, the value of b there, plus c. Okay, right, so again, as I said, you should relatively find this one's very easy. It should not take you that long to find those missing values or the factors, numbers that if you multiply them give you 8, and if you add them give you negative 6. All right, we're going to look at a few a bit later. So let me bring in one more here. We have a negative 17. So now we have got 30 here. So we're essentially looking for two numbers. When you multiply them, give you 30. Now those numbers should be both be negative. Okay, so if I write down the factors of 30, I have negative 1, negative 30. I have negative 3, negative 10. I have negative 5, negative 6. But then I left this one out because this one is the one that will make sense. Okay, because negative 2 times negative 15 gives you positive 13. And when you add them, they are going to give you negative 17. So you take those, put them in a bracket as they are there, and that should be your answer. So the only time when you have the same signs in your brackets when you factorize is when the constant is positive. And whatever the sign is depends on the value of b. Okay, that is something that you should never forget. Okay, let's bring in one more here. Again, I'm dealing with a negative. All right, so I'm just going to bring all the numbers multiplied to give you positive 48. So two negative numbers should be multiplied together. Now, if you add these, you're not going to get negative 16. You get negative 2 and negative 24. Also, if you multiply, it gives you 48. But if you add them, it can't give you that. I've got negative 3, negative 16. In fact, if I add them, suppose I was to draw a line here, all right, just so that maybe you can get the idea what I'm talking about. If I was to add here, this is negative 49, and this here is negative 26, and this one here is negative 19. So if you add, it should give you the value of the middle term, negative 16. So negative 6 and 8, okay, this one also gives you negative 14, not what we're looking for. But if we add these two, yes, these two, when you add them, they are going to give you negative 16. And when you multiply them, they're going to give you positive 48. So those are the ones that we're looking for. And since those are the ones we're looking for, we can just simply put the -4 and the -12 in the brackets with the corresponding letter of t, of course. Okay, should not be that complicated. All right, let's do ones that are a little bit more difficult than the other ones that we have. Look, here I'm going to look at the value of a, which is the leading coefficient in our ax squared plus bx plus c. And it should be, we're going to work with numbers greater than 1 for now, but what I'm referring to is when a is not equal to 1. And also remember, a cannot equal to 0. So I'm going to try two methods, and then I'm going to stick to the method that works best for me. Maybe you can try it as well, because I believe it is not a very complicated method. But let us bring in our expression. So our a is 2, our b is 5, and our c, very important, is still positive. So because our c is positive, I know that my brackets must contain two positives here. Okay, but we have a little problem here. This is not 1, so we now have to find, okay, the factors in pairs of a and the factors of c, which is 3 here. So if I take the factors of a, and the factors are numbers that go into 2, obviously it's 2 times 1 or 1 times 2, so these are the factors of a, and the factors of 3, or our c, is also just 3 and 1, 1 and 3. These are the numbers that go in there. Okay, so this is one way to do it. Right, so now after we have done that, we're going to cross multiply and see if they add up to 5 here. So when you cross multiply the 2 times 1, so I take the first column here, okay, I multiply it with the first column here. So when I cross multiply, 2 times 1 is 2 and 1 times 3 is 3. Of course, it still gives me the 5. So these are definitely the values I'm looking for. What if I do the second column here, the 1 and 2 times 1 and 3? Of course, it will also give me the same thing. All right, so the numbers I'm looking for is going to be the 2 and the okay, let me show you what is it that I'm doing. So now that we have that, I'm going to put the x next to, because I've decided to use this one. I could also have used the other one. So I'm going to put the x here because we're essentially dealing with the expression x squared, so each one must have an x. Now that we have that, and we know that I said the values or the brackets will be positive, then we are going to take this horizontal one, 2x plus 3, and that is going to be a factor, and 1x plus 1 is going to be a factor. So that's one way of doing it. It's going to be a little bit tricky, especially when you have more factors for c and so on. But this is one way that you can do it, but I prefer to do it using the second method. So you can pause the video, have a look, and see if this is a method that you are familiar with or that you like to use. Right, I prefer to use the following method as I did from the beginning. Find two numbers. Now here, the numbers should multiply to give me 6. And that 6, by the way, comes from, 2 times 3. It means take the value of A times the value of C, AC. That product, okay? That is how I know I must find the 6. And the 5 that I have here is nothing but the 5 in the middle. So it still applies the same. And once I have done that, I'm going to split the middle term. Okay, you'll see that I'm going to use that a little bit more in detail with much difficult ones, if one can say so. All right, so the numbers are 2 and 3, because 2 times 3 gives you 6, and 2 plus 3 obviously is going to give you 5. So 2 times 3 give you 6, and 2 plus 3. So here in the case, the numbers are exactly the same as the value of A and C, but not always the same. Right, so I'm going to split the 5x term, the one in the middle, so that I can factorize this by grouping. And I hope you have gone through your work on grouping. So that means I'm going to take them in pairs. So I'm going to take the first 2 here and the last 2 here. And essentially, I'm looking for common factors. So if I do that, I have got a 2x outside, then I have x plus 1. So then 2x outside, and then you get x plus 1. And here, what is common between these two terms is 3. So you can see that x plus 1 is common. So I'm going to write it once, and then everything outside the bracket is written once, and hence it is factorized completely, which was the same answer that we got when we were using example 1. But relatively straightforward and simple steps. Just for you to remember, take the first coefficient, multiply it by the constant, that gives you the guide as to what the numbers should be. All right. Let's bring another one in. So we've got 5 times 6, that is A, times 6, that is 30. So I'm looking for two numbers. Multiply together, give you 30. And if you add them, give you 17. Obviously, 5 and 6 will not add to 17. So those ones won't work. So what I've done here is I've listed so far all the factors that I know of 31 and 30. So 1 times 30 is 30. If I add them, I get 31. 2 times 15, that gives you 30. If you add them, you get 17, which is what we required. And 3 times 10 is 30, but then if you add them, give you 13. It's not what we're requiring. And I saw already that 5 and 6 doesn't work. So this combination, the 2 and the 15 work. So we are going to split that 17x. So we're going to write 5x squared plus 15x plus 2x plus 6. And now we're going to factorize them in pairs. And when you do so, you're going to end up with a common factor of x plus 1 and the 5x plus 2 in its own bracket. And that is how you do this particular question. So 5x outside, and then you have x plus 3, and then you do this 2 here. Common factor is 2. Extract it out of the terms, and you should be left with x plus 3. So x plus 3 is the common factor there. Let's bring in here question C. Right, so I have a negative here. So what I know is I'm looking for two negative numbers. My brackets will be containing negative signs. And also, I'm looking for two numbers. If you multiply, gives you 60. Comes from 12 times 5. So if what I've done here is I've written down all the factors of 60. Now, I did not put the minus and minuses here, okay, because you know you're looking for negative for negative 16. So if you add 6 plus 10, you get 16. So whether you put a negative 6 and negative 10 here, you get 16. So I know that this is the pair that I'm looking for. The two numbers must be negative 6 and negative 10. Because negative 6 times negative 10 gives you 60. And negative 6 plus negative 10 gives you negative 16. Okay? But there will be a place where I'm going to put negatives, especially when the constant is a negative. Right, so I split the value of 16y in the middle to minus 6y and minus 10y. So sometimes students are asking me, which one do you write first? Well, it's totally up to you, really. It doesn't matter. It's just how your brackets will come out. Okay, so if I had 10y here and a 6y here, maybe the bracket 1 would have been in front of the other. But I like to use where I can see common factors of 6 and 12 and 10 and 5. But still, you should get the same answer either way. So between these two, 6y is common. And here you take out a minus 5. Obviously, you have a common factor of 2y minus 1. And the 6y minus 5 that is outside the bracket is written in its own bracket. Okay, so let's do D. Again, two numbers multiply give you 180. Okay, and if we add them, obviously gives you 28. Now you've seen I have listed all the factors of 180 that I could. 1 times 180 is 180. 2 times 90 is 180. 3 times 60 is 180, and so on. But what I've also done under this red line, I've added them. And I need to get 28. So the pair that works is the 10 and 18. So that 10 and 18 is what I'm going to split here. See, I put 18k first because I know that 12 and 18, they have a 6 as a common factor, and 10 and 15 doesn't matter. All right. So when I take out common factor here, I got 6k, leaving with 2k plus 3. When I take out a 5 here, I got the same common factor. You write it once, and everything outside the bracket, you write it in its own bracket. So from 3 terms to 1 term always. That is how you factorize. Okay, so E, you have got an equation that rather looks like it's not in order. So you have to write them in ascending or descending order. So let's write it in standard form. Of course, just rearrange 2y squared plus 31y plus 15. Now it's easy for you to see. You're looking for two numbers, give you 30. And when you add them, should give you 31. And it happens to be the number 1 and 30, because 1 times 30 gives you 30, and 1 plus 30 gives you 31. So I'm going to split the 31y here by taking 2y squared plus 1y plus 30y plus 15. I chose the 30 here with the 15 because they're sharing a common factor. Taking out y here for these two leaves you with 2y plus 1. Taking out 15 leaves you with 2y plus 1. 2y being the common factor, you write it once, and everything outside the bracket in its own bracket. And that should do for your answer there. Right, so now we're going to look at when the constant is negative. 1. This is now something you must be on the lookout for. Alright, so what I can tell you of right from the beginning is that the two brackets that you're going to have right towards the end, one will contain a positive, one will contain a negative. That is one thing that you should remember. So it does not matter what the sign here is for the value of b. This case, you have a minus in front of the constant. One bracket will be positive, one bracket will be negative, which means that if you do the same, look for two numbers, multiply to give you this and add to give you that, the two numbers, one must be positive and one must be negative. So your understanding of directed numbers also play a very big role. So I'm going to do equations first where the value of a is equal to 1, right? So I have got x squared minus 11x minus 12. See, I highlighted that minus 12, so you know. All right, so two numbers to multiply give you negative 12, and then you should add, but here you can say subtract. You can subtract to give you 11, right? So if you look at what I did here is I took all the factors of negative 12, 1 times negative 12, 2 times negative 6, and 3 times negative 4, and take note that I put the negative on the bigger number, so to speak, because I'm looking for a negative answer. Right, suppose this answer was positive here, I will be putting my minuses at a small number. Alright, anyway, you should realize that the two numbers I'm looking for is 1 and negative 12, because 1 minus 12 gives you negative 11. This is what we're requiring, and 1 times negative 12 gives you negative 12. Right, so we are saying the constant term is negative. One bracket will have a positive, one will have a negative, and because this is 1, I can just take my values and put them right into the brackets, obviously with these particular letters here that I have. I have an x, so my brackets must contain x. If it was t squared minus 11t, I would have a t here in my brackets. So make sure your letters correspond with whatever is in the expression. Okay, so here we have another one, x squared plus 3x minus 10. So you might not see this one all the time. I just put it there for emphasizing that point when a is equal to 1. Of course, a cannot equal to 0. So you're looking for two numbers, multiply, give you negative 10, and you add them, give you this one here. So I took, can you see that I have put the minus in on the smaller number because I know I'm finding a positive number here. So if I take 10 minus 9, minus 1, I get 9. That's not what I'm looking for. But 5 minus 2 is 3. Okay, because 5 times negative 2. So this is the numbers I'm looking for. So one bracket is x minus 2. One bracket will be x plus 5, as you can see in that particular case. Right, so just remember that hint. If the value of b is positive, like what I have here, positive x, 3x, then I put my minus in front of the smaller number. In this particular case, it was minus 11. I put my minus in front of the big number. Okay. All right, let's do a few more. So here you have got q squared plus 2q minus 8. So two numbers multiply, give you negative 8. And if you add them, you get positive 2. I put my minus in the smaller number. Factors of 8 is 1 times 8 and 2 times 4. So negative here gives me negative 8 if you multiply. But then when you add or subtract, you want 2. And to get that 2, it's going to be the 4 and the negative 2, or the negative 2 and the 4. Okay, so one bracket then will be q plus 4, and one will be q minus 2. So again, it doesn't matter which bracket you write first. Another one here. So you have got a minus here. So because I have a minus, I'm going to put my negative in front of a bigger number. All right, find two numbers which multiply, give you this negative 24, and when you add them or subtract them, okay, it's reverse operations of the other. All right, but if you subtract them, give you negative 5. So I write down all the numbers that you multiply to give you 24. Well, not all of them, because I stopped halfway and I realized I have my answer. 1 times negative 24 is negative 24, but it doesn't subtract to negative 5. But the last one do. Negative 3 or 3 times negative 8 is negative 24, and 3 minus 8 is negative 5. So that is what I'm looking for. So one bracket is 3 plus r plus 3, and one will be r minus 8. Remember, I said the brackets will have different signs now. Okay, so let's make the value of a not 1 but some other value like 3 bigger than 1. Right, so again we take the same thing. 3 times negative 10 gives you negative 30. So look for all numbers, multiply, give you negative 30. And if you subtract them, you get 13. So the only one that will work is this one here. So I put my minus at a smaller one because of this positive. And negative 2 times 15 is negative 30. And negative 2 plus 15, or 15 minus 2, either way, gives you that 13. So I'm going to split the 13x using this negative 2 and the 15, but I decided to put the 15 first because it goes nicely with the 3, because they share a common factor, and the negative 2 with the negative 10. So I do it in pairs, and x plus 5 is a common factor, and everything outside the bracket comes in its own bracket. Here we have another one again. So 12 times negative 5 is negative 60. So I wrote down all the factors of negative 60. Right, so we are looking essentially for, you see that I also put the minus at the bigger number because I am seeing the value of b is minus. Here the value of b was a positive 13. That is why I put the minus at the smaller numbers. That's something you can also do. All right, so the only one that will work is this 4 and negative 15. All right, so negative 15 and 4 goes together. So if you say, well, 4 or negative 15 plus 4 gives you negative 11. All right, so I split that negative 11y in between using the 4 and the minus 15 with the y's there. Now I can take out common factors for both in pairs, and 3y plus 1 is a common factor, and whatever is outside comes in its own bracket, and now my work there is done. So this little trial and error has to be done. Unfortunately, you can't run away from it for now. So you need to be able to make sure that you pick the right factors and follow the right strategy. Okay, so we have got another one here. So 20 times negative 3. So all the factors of negative 60. Now, because this is positive 11, I put my minus obviously at the smaller numbers. And you can see the one in red. These are the numbers. I'm going to split then the 11a here. So I'm going to decide, I'm going to take my negative 5a, and I'm going to take the 15a. All right, see which one goes nicely with each other, but it's totally up to you. You can put 15a here and a minus 4a there, still going to give you the same answer. So I get a common factor of 5 minus 1 if I do them in grouping or pairs. And then you put everything outside the bracket in its own bracket, and 5a minus 1 in its own bracket. One term, your work then there is done. Okay, so we have got here with a very big number though. You see why I sometimes say the factor story can work if you like that very first method, but I tend to stick with what is best, what you can find. So two numbers multiply to give you negative 280. If you didn't figure it out, I already got to those numbers. Okay, so it's negative 35 and 8. Sometimes I would advise you maybe that you can find the 280. You can write it in prime factor form. Sometimes it helps me. I know that, for example, if I just have to write it down, if I have to find that, very fast, that 280 is nothing but, in prime factor form, it will be 2 cubed, which is 8, times 5 times 7, right, times 5 times 7. So what I did is, if I did that, then I realized, wait a minute, I can actually play around with these factors here, and I looked at my 8 here, and I also looked at my 35 here. All right, and remember, one has to be positive, one has to be minus, and I have to put my minus at the bigger value, and then that's how I know that if you have negative 35 and you add 8, well, guess what? You're going to get negative 27. All right, so if that haven't worked, I'd probably be using some other factors, maybe 14 times 9 or something like that. All right, so what I'm saying there is I will be playing around, let me say 2 squared times maybe another 2 times 5 times 7. It's totally up to you, playing around with that. So obviously here I will have maybe something like, 70 times 4. Yeah, 70 times 4, and play around, see if I can get to 27. Bottom line is, you have to do the trial and error work in order for you to find those particular values. Split my middle term, and then I get a common factor of 4b minus 5, and here is my answer then in completed.